Good morning. This is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. PsychicTarot.ca, book your tarot reading and unlock your spiritual journey. And the Pepper Master, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids and cubs, and welcome to Season 5, and I believe it's episode number 864 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. Oh, Canada, always 100% Canadian. Today, recording day is Monday. I need to look at the date, actually. March 16th, 2026, and it looks like it's going to be a beautiful day here at the Beaver Lodge. See blue sky and a couple of white fluffy clouds, so hopefully it will be very nice. We had a little bit of snow over the course of the past few days, but it has melted since, and I'm starting to see the snowbells in the garden and the crocus trying to make an effort through the lawn. So maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. Who knows? But this is Canada, so there's always a Canada winter. Canadian winter is sort of like a horror movie. Winter always comes back for one last scare. Oh, man. A big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Pepper Master, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and PsychicTarot.ca. Kids and cubs, how is your mental health doing today? I am doing well, I have to say. I'm a little tired not only because, but mainly because I slept in shifts last night. The Oscars started, and I was going to sit down to watch them, and I was feeling a little pooped. So I went to stretch out, and then next thing I knew, it was about 4 hours or almost 5 hours later, which is most of my night. So, so I was up for a bit in the middle of the night, and then went back to bed and got back up after that. And when I got up that time, I realized I could probably use maybe an hour more. So feeling a little sleepy, but my mood is good. And I mean, how can it not be? We had some exceptional Paralympics, and we will talk more about that on another show. Hopefully, I'll be able to do a roundup again of what happened at the Paralympics on a separate show. And I also didn't do the second week of the Olympics as well. Canadians who make us proud show. So I have that on the list that I want to do, and hopefully I'll be able to do that soon because hopefully it will be a lighter week in the news. And then, of course, when the Paralympics are over, me as a curler, well, the Women's World Championships of Curling are on, so I'm a happy beaver. And we had some lovely time with some friends on Saturday. We actually had a little house gathering before we all went out dancing, and I haven't been out dancing in quite a long time, so that was a lot of fun. Felt it a little bit yesterday. It might also explain why I was a little pooped, because I'm not used to being out that late now that I'm of a certain vintage. So that may explain me falling asleep early last night, way earlier than I had intended. But yeah, and then I'm here with you, so I'm in a good mood. And then after this, I have some curling with my team, my Monday day team, who I really enjoy. So yeah, it's gearing up to be a good day. I'm in a good mood, and I hope you are too. Right. Today, we are going to talk about um, four things. We're going to talk about some resiliency. We're going to talk about affordability, a bit of secrecy, and some lunacy. I think we will do that. I was going to say not in that particular order, but I think we will do it in that order. um, let's see. Well, with the first one, resiliency. That is about our prime minister, of course. Oh, by the way, I forgot before I get into that. I'm so sorry. I intended to say it. In the chat with us is my friend, my buddy, my mate, Aussie Pete. How are you, man? I'm so glad that you're here. And it's not my news to share. He can share if he wants. Um, but he recently gave me some very, 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 very good news. And I'm so happy for you. And we need to set a time for a video call because I want to know everything. All right. Everything. You don't leave anything out. Um, Okay. That's cryptic, I know. I for everybody else watching and listening, but, I'm, how would I put it? I love it when good things happen to good people, and, Ozzy Pete is, definitely good people. Let's just put it that way. So I'm also a very happy beaver for that reason. Oh, and for those wondering, it seems that we did get the airline to pay back our second ticket finally. The money is in the bank account now. We have it. So, yeah, well, we'll be deciding what we do from this point on afterwards. But that's a positive development. That's a positive development. We'll take that. So, also another reason I'm in a good mood. Lots of reasons I'm in a good mood. All right. So, resiliency. That's a bit, of course, about our prime minister on his yet latest trip. And he is trying, of course, uh, to reorient us, to help pivot us away from the United States as much as can be done, of course, uh, considering geography and just how um, integrated and intertwined we are. Some days we wish that that wasn't exactly the case, but it is our reality. But still, we need to make this pivot to be doing more business with more of our international partners and taking advantage of the fact that we are the most connected country in the world to others by virtue of the fact that of all the free trade agreements that we haven't fully enacted, but that we are doing now, or not necessarily enacted, but fully maximized. But we're in the process of doing that now. And by virtue of the fact that we're the only nation that has a free trade agreement with every other one of the G7 nations, and the fact that we are at the heart of the move to push the CETA trading blocks and the CPTPP trading blocks together, which would create a market of about 1.5 billion people, which is much larger than the one that the United States has to offer. And perhaps if we do more trade with each other, like I said, we won't be able to decouple completely, but maybe significantly enough so that when the United States makes some threats, well, they might have a little bit less power or less sway. Um, so, yeah, on that front, the prime minister was in Norway to meet with the prime minister Jonas Gahr Store, and in the course of that, it says here that following the meeting, the leaders issued a joint statement outlining a new partnership between Canada and Norway focused on space-based technologies, artificial intelligence, critical minerals, and cooperation in Euro-Atlantic security. As the first pillar of the partnership, Canada and Norway will deepen collaboration in space-based dual-use capabilities, including Earth observation, navigation, secure satellite communications, and maritime domain awareness capabilities crucial to Canada's Arctic and North. Second, the Prime Minister's committed to strengthening sovereign AI capabilities through coordinated action, issuing an additional joint statement on sovereign technology and AI. The two countries will partner in AI infrastructure research and development, governance, and standards, including efforts to promote and secure diverse supply chains. Not to promote and secure, sorry, to promote secure and diversified supply chains. Third, Canada and Norway have signed a memorandum of understanding on critical minerals to accelerate the development of secure critical mineral supply chains. The countries aim to expand minerals trade and investment, including opportunities to exchange technical expertise in mineral exploration, mining, and value added processing, and maybe learn one thing or two about sovereign wealth funds from Norway so that we might be able to create one with regard to critical minerals and maybe yeah, reclaim the chance that we blew on oil and gas. That might be a smart idea. Just saying, putting it out there. Finally, Prime Minister Carney underscored how Canada is building up our allied defense supply chains to support collective security. The Prime Ministers discussed mobilizing financing at scale to strengthen defense production and supply chains, including through the Defense Security and Resilience Bank. They emphasized the growing defense industrial collaboration between Canada and Norway, demonstrated through the recent $9.6 million contract awarded to the joint venture Kongsberg Vanguard LP, a partnership. Let me see that. Yes, a partnership between Norwegian firms Kongsberg Defence and Aerospace and Salt Ship Design, as well as Ottawa-based Adaptive Marine Solutions Incorporated. Together, the joint venture will design the Canadian Coast Guard's future mid-shore multi-mission vessels, which will be built under Canada's national shipbuilding strategy. Prime Minister Carney and Prime Minister Storr condemned the Iranian regime's missile and drone attacks on civilians across the Middle East and expressed deep concern over regional escalation. They agreed that diplomatic engagement is essential to avoid a wider conflict that would devastate civilian populations and worsen the global economic and energy situation. The leaders reiterated their enduring support for Ukraine against Russian aggression and agreed on the imperative of achieving a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, backed by robust security guarantees. To support the return of prisoners of war and unlawfully detained civilians, Canada and Norway, in coordination with Ukraine, announced they will organize a ministerial conference to be held in Toronto on September 28 and 29, 2026. As Canada diversifies its trade partnerships, accelerates major nation-building projects, builds out its defense capabilities, and attracts greater investment into its economy, Prime Minister Carney emphasized the opportunities to deepen our commercial ties with Norway. And then said Prime Minister Carney thanked Prime Minister Storr for convening the Canada-Nordic Summit, which was going to take place on the next day in Oslo, and saying that he looks forward to attending the summit. And the leaders, of course, agreed to remain in close contact. So yes, the joint statement develops on these things a bit more, and I will include here in the chat for kids and cubs who would like to check that out. So all the elements that we were talking about in terms of broader outlines, like commitment to Arctic security and cooperation, support for industrial and economic cooperation, space, sovereign technology and artificial intelligence cooperation, critical minerals, energy cooperation, climate, biodiversity, and oceans. All of that is listed in the document with a little bit more detail on some of the things that they will be working on together. All right. After this, of course, there was that meeting with the Nordic countries. And in this instance here, let's see what it says here. In a more dangerous, divided, and uncertain world, it sounds like the beginning of a trailer for a movie, right? In a more dangerous, divided, and uncertain world, one man. Security can no longer be taken for granted. Canada is strengthening its defenses in the north and working closely with trusted partners to protect our sovereignty and reinforce collective security. To bolster Canada's Arctic security, defense, and economic partnerships, the Prime Minister traveled to Bardufoss and Oslo, Norway this week. In Bardufoss, the Prime Minister observed Exercise Cold Response, a Norwegian-led NATO exercise above the Arctic Circle to enhance the alliance's readiness, interoperability, and defense capabilities. Prime Minister Carney was joined by the Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr Store, and the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz. While in Norway, Prime Minister Carney attended the Canada Nordic Summit, where he met with leaders from Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden to reinforce efforts to strengthen transatlantic security in the North. In a joint statement, the leaders outlined the deepened partnership between Canada and Nordic nations in trade, technology, energy, and defense and security. Norway is home to the world's largest sovereign wealth fund with a value of over $3.5 trillion. In Oslo, the Prime Minister held meetings with business leaders to position Canada as a premier destination for international capital. As Canada diversifies its trade partnerships, accelerates major nation building projects, builds out its defense capabilities, and attracts greater investment into its economy, Prime Minister Carney emphasized the opportunities to invest in Canada. Building on this momentum, Canadian company Champion Iron has recently announced that they are moving forward with the acquisition of Norwegian company Rana Gruber ASA, a leading producer of high-grade iron ore in Norway. The proposed transaction is for an estimated equity value of approximately $400 million. Following the conclusion of his visit, the Prime Minister will visit the United Kingdom to meet with Prime Minister of United Kingdom Sir Keir Starmer and have an audience with His Majesty King Charles III. The Prime Ministers will discuss progress underway to deepen Canada and the United Kingdom's defense, trade, and economic partnerships. And then, of course, I'm just going to take a look here at the joint statement of Northern Allies and strategic partners. This is the one between the two leaders, and this is the joint statement by the Prime Ministers of the Nordic countries in Canada. We, the Prime Ministers of the Nordic countries of Canada, the Nordic countries of Canada. We, the Prime Ministers of the Nordic countries and Canada, met in Oslo today, 15th March 2026. At a time characterized by heightened geopolitical tensions, war, and a multitude of crises, we are united in the view that international cooperation, based on international law, shared values, and interests, remains the best way to strengthen our common security and prosperity. As democracies and countries committed to the rule of law, human rights, and the territorial integrity and sovereignty of states, we share fundamental values and strengths. Today, we have agreed to deepen cooperation between countries to ensure the safety, security, and sovereignty of our people and to build prosperous and green economies of the future. We commit to meeting more regularly at different levels to advance our shared principles and interests. We are committed to Arctic security and to ensuring that the people who live in our part of the world can prosper in peace. To achieve this, we will work in partnerships with Indigenous and Northern communities to unlock the potential of the Arctic to prevent and mitigate the effects of climate change and to promote security. The Nordic countries and Canada are close allies. As Arctic states, we work together to advance security and stability for all allies in this strategically important region. We are committed to NATO's effort to bolster the alliance's presence, deterrence, and defense in the Arctic and to further developing the strong collaboration to the benefit of all allies. We welcome NATO's enhanced vigilance activity, Arctic Sentry, which strengthens NATO's posture in the Arctic, and the High North with SACEUR's area of responsibility. We also welcome Exercise Cold Response, Operation Nanook, Exercise Arctic Endurance, and others like it, which build interoperability between those of our armed forces that participate. In support of collective defense, security, and resilience, the Nordic countries in Canada will enhance defense industrial capacity to ramp up defense production, strengthen capabilities, respond to hybrid threats, build resilient infrastructure, and develop interoperable, innovative, and dual-use technologies. We will continue to collaborate through military missions and activities such as NATO's forward land forces in Finland, the Baltic states, and Poland, where our forces serve to bolster NATO's eastern flank and to deter Russian aggression. Our support for Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity in the face of Russia's illegal war of aggression is unwavering. Ukraine's security is integral to Europe and Euro-Atlantic security. We will continue to provide economic, civilian, military, and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine and call on all members of the Coalition of the Willing to increase their support. We will continue coordination on our overall assistance, including on sanctions to further restrict the Kremlin's ability to fund its illegal war that Donald Trump is not helping with. We agree on the importance of ensuring Ukraine's ability to defend itself. A just and lasting peace requires credible and legally binding security guarantees for Ukraine to deter future aggression and ensure enduring stability across Europe. We are committed to building competitive, prosperous, and green economies for the future that are open to the world, but that guard against dangerous dependencies. The Nordic countries and Canada are robust, open economies, and together we represent a substantial market. We are committed to upholding the rules-based system of international trade and support efforts to reform and revitalize the World Trade Organization. That's the Northern countries, the Nordic countries, getting together and repeating that line that the Prime Minister said a couple of weeks ago when he uh, told the world about the variable geometry and was speaking about when the Nordic countries get together to work on certain things, what the size of that potential economy and economic activity could be. Working together, we will expand bilateral trade and investment ties in setting forward a forward-looking agenda for cooperation anchored in shared values and economic complementarities. With technology and international trade increasingly being used as a coercive tool, we commit to enhancing our cooperation on economic security. We will explore increased cooperation in technological development, including the area of quantum, connectivity, artificial intelligence, satellite and space technology to better shape our defense, economic power, and global competitiveness. We work together to secure enhanced access to critical minerals and a reliable global supply chains rooted in our shared commitment to fair and open trade and high environmental and labor standards. We recognize that zero and low carbon energy sources and clean energy technologies can drive economic growth, create jobs, and reduce emissions. We will strengthen cooperation to unlock new trade and investment opportunities, scale up energy technologies, and build secure, sustainable, and complementary energy supply chains. Together, the Nordic countries and Canada constitute a formidable partnership. We commit to deepening this and to develop our cooperation on the basis of respect, trust, and shared values and interests. So that's what they got up to. And then it would appear that the Prime Minister has already met with the Prime Minister of the UK. They had a first readout yesterday that doesn't say much other than they discussed the conflict in the East, including the growing humanitarian crisis in Lebanon. And yes, in Lebanon, there's Israel has been attacking there, and again, a lot of displaced people. I think in Iran, last numbers I heard, about 3.2 million people have been displaced so far. Then there was a second readout based on meetings they had today, and it says once again they discussed the situation in the Middle East. They condemned the Iranian regime's missile and drone attacks, including on civilian and energy infrastructure, and expressed deep concern over the toll on civilians, the risk of further regional escalation, and the broader global economic consequences of the conflict, including rising energy prices. The Prime Ministers also reaffirmed their determination to maintain pressure on Russia to end its war of aggression against Ukraine and underscored Canada's and the UK's steadfast support for Ukraine. Prime Minister Carney and Prime Minister Starmer affirmed the strength of the Canada-UK partnership and the work underway to deepen economic and security cooperation. They emphasized innovative approaches to mobilize financing at a scale to strengthen defense production and supply chains, including through initiatives such as the proposed Defense Security and Resilience Bank. And of course, they agreed to remain in close contact. All right, so those are sort of the readouts from, well, sort of, they are the readouts from the Prime Minister's activities out there. Um, One of the things that apparently is not on the table when the Prime Minister was in Norway, because the Chancellor of Germany was there, and there is that joint bid between Norway and Germany for the submarines contract. And it says here that the submarines were off the table for this particular meeting. According to Murray Brewster of CBC, Prime Minister Mark Carney touched down in Norway early Friday, where he got important FaceTime with the Nordic country's leader and the German Chancellor before taking in a major NATO wargaming exercise that includes Canadian troops. Both countries are backing a bid by German submarine maker TKMS to sell Canada 12 new submarines, a multi-billion-dollar program that has been fast-tracked by the Liberal government. Despite the high stakes militarily, economically, and diplomatically, Carney said he doesn't expect the submarine bid to be discussed among the three leaders. Quote, "The short answer is no," he said when asked about the possibility in Yellowknife prior to boarding a flight to Europe. Quote, "Because we're at a phase in that process where the final bids have been submitted." So, yes, we are studying the bids and no future selling at this particular point. Both TKMS and other bidders, South Korea's Hanwha Ocean, handed in their proposals to the federal government's Defense Investment Agency on March 2nd. Over the next month, federal officials will be able to ask clarifying questions before the bidding is fully closed in early April. Both companies have been told to expect a swift decision, perhaps as soon as late June. The joint German and Norwegian pitch has been built around North Atlantic solidarity and long-time cooperation as NATO allies, as well as the economies of scale, with all three nations running the same kind of submarines. TKMS is offering Type 212 CD, a newer version of the Type 212 boat already in service with several navies. Michael Byers, a political and defense expert at the University of British Columbia, said even if the specific subject of the submarine bid is off limits, there's always the subject of allied cooperation. Quote, I'm sure the Germans and the Norwegians are very glad that they'll get to speak with him. Whether the Prime Minister is susceptible to that kind of friendly cajoling, I don't know, said Byers, who added that his perception is the Prime Minister is fairly clear-eyed and businesslike. Quote, my sense is that he's a pretty hard-headed guy, and if he sees an advantage in going in with the if he sees an advantage in going with the South Korean company, he'll go with the South Korean company. This is not about sentimentality. This is a rational decision that needs to be made. All three leaders will travel north to Bardufoss above the Arctic Circle later on Friday, where more than 25,000 NATO soldiers, sailors, and aircrews are participating in the alliance's biannual exercise known as Cold Response. The main exercise started on March 9th and runs until the 19th. It's taking place on land, at sea, and in the air, and involves 14 countries. Keir Giles, a defense expert at the UK-based Chatham House, said the participation of Canadian troops is important beyond the show of solidarity. Quote, troops from Canada will be used to operating in these kinds of conditions in the Arctic, said Giles, and there's a lot of valuable experience that they can share with troops that are deploying from farther south for whom this may be entirely unfamiliar. Norwegian defense officials have played up the fact that this iteration of the long-standing war game, which practices reinforcing the country in the event of a major crisis, includes several hundred civilians playing various roles. It's an important addition, said Giles. War happens among people, and that has to be factored into the realistic assessment of how a war is going to progress, Giles said. In Ukraine, it's been clear what the impact on civilian populations is, and that, of course, needs to be modeled in any country that actually wants to protect its civilians against conflict. NATO nations have been struggling with ways to rally their population, and Giles says there are important lessons to be learned over the next several days. Quote, it's not just keeping them alive, it's also the resilience they provide, he said. It's means of making sure that societies and economies can continue to function while you have an adversary which is doing its best to make sure that they don't. And there you have it, kids and cubs. A little bit on those trips, at least from the Prime Minister's side. Let's see if there's anything else here at the moment on this very quickly. Let's see. There we go. And according to Murray Brewster again, easing the economic pain in the world oil markets was on the minds of both Prime Minister Mark Carney and his Norwegian counterpart Jonas Gahr Store as they met in Oslo Saturday. Okay. The meeting after the International Energy Agency earlier this week called on its 32 members to release 400 million barrels of oil to prevent global shortages and calm jittery markets which have been rattled by the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran. Taking a little side note here, once again, in case some people missed it, Pierre Poilievre had a policy in his new Hey, I Can Carney 2 tour, and I've got ideas, and suggested that Canada should have its own strategic reserves of oil and critical minerals. And then in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister had to basically school Pierre Poilievre that the G7 oil reserve is contributed to by Canada, and that of all the G7 nations, Canada is the only net exporter of this type of energy, where the others are not. So therefore, we don't need to have some strategic reserves. We are the reserve. Now, of course, I'm sure Pierre would specifically say yes, but I mean more of it pumped out of the ground already in a hangar somewhere that we are ready to ship it out. With regard to that, production can be increased. It takes a little time to come online, but that can be done. Any issue that we have is more on infrastructure in terms of getting it to places more than the ability to actually get it out of the ground. All right. Canada has agreed to contribute 23.6 million barrels, Energy Minister Tim Hodgson announced on Friday. During a visit to the Holmenkollen ski festival in Oslo and on Saturday, Carney tried to reinforce a calming message noting that Canada, as a net exporter of oil, doesn't hold a strategic reserve and isn't required to contribute, but will do so nonetheless. From Canada's perspective, we are low risk producers of oil. We are low risk producers of natural gas. We're reliable. The oil market is tight, that's the reality, and the last thing you need in a tight market is to have more problems, and Canada is part of the solution in that regard. The United States says it will release 172 million barrels of oil from its strategic petroleum reserve as its contribution to coordinated efforts with the IEA, but the US also went its own way in temporarily easing sanctions on Russia's shadow fleet of tankers, much to the dismay and opposition of other G7 leaders, including Carney. And I will have it here, kits and cubs, that the United States is a country that is 8.5 to 9 times larger than Canada, and they did not contribute 8.5 to 9 times what it is. Well, maybe 8 times what we're contributing. So, by population, we have contributed more to whatever global efforts are going on right now to temporarily stabilize the price of oil by releasing extra barrels. Norway is a major offshore oil producer, but has not said whether it will up production to help meet the IEA's call. Oil prices have surged, with tankers being unable to sail through the Strait of Hormuz for fears of attack by Iran. And I am looking at price right now, kits and cubs, and it is trading at about $96.97 at the moment. On February 26th, it was trading at $64.39. And on December 17th, it was trading at $52.12. So the price of crude is closing in on trading at double what it was just before Christmas. That's quite a bit of money that's coming out of people's pockets, and that's going to affect things over the months to come. There's definitely going to be some inflation, particularly food inflation, over the months to come when we count oil, gas, shipping, all of that kind of stuff. The Strait of Hormuz, as you know, everybody's been saying it, so everybody knows it probably by now, is 20% or 1/5 of the world's oil. But what you might not know is that it's 33% of all oil that is shipped by tanker. So it's a significant amount of oil. There's only so much that can be made up by shipping it by land. Let's just put it that way, or overland, I should say. All right, let's go back. In a joint statement issued late Saturday at a bilateral meeting, Carney and Storr emphasized their commitment to working together to leverage each country's position to deliver affordable, security, and sustainable energy, among other things. Going into dinner at Storr's official residence, the Norwegian Prime Minister said the war in the Middle East should end, but instead it is escalating. Quote, "There's no real script on how it's going to evolve and end," said Storr, without making direct reference to the United States and Israel. "It is escalating with dramatic consequences for people in the region, but also beyond, and I don't think we have the blueprint for that. I mean, those who are engaged in that war have to take the responsibility for helping it end." Carney agreed and said leaders need to discuss what can be done to first de-escalate and then end hostilities. Quote, "We remind all belligerents in the conflict of their responsibilities to adhere to international law," Carney said. "That means no attacks on civilian infrastructure and certainly civilians, and care in that regard." Both Canada and Norway pledged to increase defense and security cooperation in the Arctic as well as in space, and to continue their support of Ukraine in its war against Russia. Quote, "We have been in cooperation in connection with the Prime Minister's visit," said Storr. "And I was really so positively surprised to see in the really key areas of our times that we have so much we can do together. Energy, artificial intelligence, digitalization of our economies, security. We made reference to that. Critical minerals. So the like-mindedness is really based on some key economic foundations." And that also was the Prime Minister of Norway. Meanwhile, While the prime minister is doing that, Pierre Poilievre is on his tour of the US to follow up his tour of Europe, which again, we have not yet done a deep dive into, but hasn't gone well, as you can tell. There was the huge article in the paper that had the big title indicating that he had lost the election and also lost his seat. It seems that the highest profile person he spoke to or in front of was Lettuce Liz Truss, whose taxation platform or economic platform he was going to run on as a conservative leader originally, until, well, she went down and the economic situations changed a little bit. And I guess he didn't have a plan B because he presented that horrible costing during the election that had him laughed out of the country. Well, laughed out of his seat by anybody who knew the least little bit about economics. Then he delivered a speech at the Margaret Thatcher luncheon. I think that's where Liz Truss was there. Then there was a couple of other meetings. I believe there was a podcast appearance in which this man, who, while we are signing a whole bunch of deals with other nations talking about green elements and recognizing that there's going to be a carbon border adjustment mechanism in Europe happening, if it hasn't started already, um, that abandoning the move towards greener, renewable, more cleaner technologies is not the way of the future, but seems to be doubling down on that, talking about green grifters. And this time, when he was delivering his speech um, in Detroit yesterday, talking about scrapping the EV mandates altogether, which I don't know if he's noticed, but is a policy that's probably not going to age very well, given the price of gas is up, which probably would incentivize people wanting to buy EVs. In this time of disruption, you have all these people going, "Hey, that's why we need more pipelines. That's why we need more pipelines. That's why we need more pipelines." Well, we could also say, or that's why we need more renewables and more battery storage. Because um, a lot of people who still remember the 80s, that's what followed the oil crisis of the 70s. That period of stagflation where interest rates were at really, really high, like 18% or something like that. So yeah, yeah, we might not want to do that again. Thank you, please and thank you. So yeah, maybe it's time to just pull the switch and finally make the switch. The same. So with the price of gas at over $1.80 a liter in Quebec, over $1.50 a liter here, when not too long ago it was about $1.16 or so. That might make a lot of people think that their next purchase uh, should be maybe something electric. And given that we have those EV incentives that have returned, that might help with that. Pierre keeps on saying that it's a dying market based on the fact that sales of EVs dropped momentarily when the incentives disappeared. But now that they're back and the price of gas is high again, people might be looking at things a little differently. So yeah, that little part of his speech down south probably won't be aging very well, I would assume. And it's really odd that Pierre Poilievre is doing the same thing that Danielle Smith has done. Danielle Smith on renewable energies just shut the door on that and says, nope, we're not going to do that. We're just going to deny what the future is and let that opportunity pass us by. And Pierre seems to be campaigning on the same thing on EVs. The only problem for Pierre is that, at least for Danielle, when there's a major oil disruption around the world, the price of oil goes up and she makes a lot of money. So does Alberta on royalties and that type of stuff. Whereas in Pierre's situation, when the price of gas goes up, people might be more inclined to actually look at buying an EV. Um, on that front, just between you and me, Kits and Cubs, if I was a McCartney, um, I would be realizing right now that even though he's flying high in the polls, there's going to come a time when what's happening right now is going to work its way through the system, and he's going to have a situation very similar to that which Justin Trudeau had on his hands. Higher inflation, particularly higher food inflation, with a yippee chihuahua from the opposition claiming that it's all his fault rather than the fault of what's going on in the world, and a high enough percentage of the population ready and willing to believe him, and more desperate uh, to maybe want to listen to the simple man with simple solutions. Because this next round of food inflation and inflation is going to build on top of the one that we just had, and wages have not yet increased enough for people to recover from the first one. And if you're at the lower end of the economic ladder, benefits certainly have not increased enough to cover that on any permanent basis. So that risks having a big dip in his popularity. And one of the things he might be well advised to do, I don't know at what time will be the most strategic or actually yield the best benefit, but is to realize that with the rising royalty revenue, that maybe a portion of that should be hived off and redistributed to the people, perhaps quarterly, as a compensation for the rising oil and gas prices and what that's doing to the economy and rising food prices, because this didn't happen through any fault of our own. And given that we are getting a little bit of a benefit as a result of that, um, maybe that should go back in the pockets of the people. Um, Now, again, I'm not an economist, and there's probably a whole bunch of other factors that are caused by this that maybe makes it such that we don't end up coming out of this as a net negative or net positive, I should say. Once you look at the impact on that on shipping and everything else that we have shipped here and all that kind of stuff, decreased economic activity if people are buying less and what that does to jobs and all that kind of stuff. Maybe there's not that much left over when you have to shore up all those other things. But if there is, that would probably be a good idea. And if there isn't, um, people probably wouldn't be objecting at this particular moment to an excess profits tax on the oil, and then maybe taking that money and redistributing it somehow. Because if population is just left to absorb these additional costs, and some relief comes 6 months to 1 year later when everybody realizes, oh, there's a problem. Uh, there could be a dip in the public opinion polls that happened way before that. Um, Perhaps to somewhat pre-announce that because our royalties are increasing, that and a lot of people are feeling some pain, that the government's going to help us with some of that pain, might be particularly well received, especially if he doesn't have to be first prompted by the NDP to do it. Just saying. Something that hopefully there's some people that are sitting in some rooms with some calculators and exploring the math on, because yeah, when the price of oil jumps from 54 to 96 or so in the space of 3 months, um, uh, there's there's a material difference in how much is coming in to government coffers there. Yes, it'll help if somebody wants to just hoard it all and say, "Hey, our deficit is much less than we thought it was. Aren't we great economic managers?" Yeah, you can do that, uh, or you can give the money to people so that they can eat. Just saying. Income tested downwards, of course, so that people that need it the most get the most. But um, there's probably um, there's probably uh, something there. Thanks. The prime minister might have a little bit of uh, runway, given the fact that we just had the increased GST rebate to deal with groceries. Um, but if you want people to actually feel the relief, not to just have to get the relief for what happened in the first round, now, all this time later, um, as a new round of price increases and supply shocks starts up again, you might want to be a little bit more ahead of the ball on this one this time than you were on the last one. Just a suggestion. So yeah, Pierre is over there and making a pitch and unveiling his new auto plan that he thought of all by himself, new and innovative. Nobody has ever thought of a plan like this before. It's all good stuff. And let's hear a little bit more about what Pierre's plan is. This is according to Mason Maharaj. See, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre unveiled the party's most substantial auto strategy to date. Did they release an auto strategy before? Okay. Under his leadership, which he says will both bring back production to Canada and be, quote, highly attractive to partners south of the border. Mm-hmm. Keep talking. Quote, Canada's auto sector must stay alive and it must have access to the U.S. to do so, Poilievre said while in Windsor, Ontario on Sunday. Okay, I think I'm starting to see the problem. It must have access to the U.S. in order to stay alive, and we have a U.S. that has actively told us to our faces and said it to the world on camera that they don't want our cars and that we have nothing they need. Okay, let's see where he goes with this. Poilievre said he'd like to institute a tariff-free auto pact and has a plan to restore Canada's auto production to 2 million cars per year over the next 10 years. The tariff-free auto pact we had before the United States decided they didn't want to have a tariff-free auto pact to restore production to 2 million cars per year over the next 10 years. So to get back to where we were 10 years from now. Okay, keep going. Also included in the plan is a call to remove the GST on all Canadian-made vehicles, which, if you actually do the math of taking a 5% GST, let's say, off a $50,000 EV, and you was it $50,000 EV? Not out actually, just be sure. Because yes, I think 50,000 was the maximum. I'm just gonna take a look. Nope, can't find that off the top of my head here. If you debate Canada, all right, up to $5,000 for battery electric vehicles. Uh, Eligible vehicles must have a base model price under $50,000, though some exceptions apply for Canadian-made vehicles. So if your vehicle is Canadian-made and is over $50,000, you could probably still apply for it. But if you're buying something that's not Canadian, it's only for vehicles under $50,000. All right, so that's what it was. Just wanted to make sure I had that number right. So let's say you do the maximum, 5% of $50,000. That's $2,500. The EV rebate that we have is offering $5,000 if you buy them in the first year of the 5-year plan. And then it increasingly goes down over those incentives will gradually decline over the 5-year period. So $5,000 for battery electric and fuel electric vehicles and $2,500 for plug-in hybrids. So far, from what I'm reading from this document, from this newspaper article here, newspaper CBC article, is that Pierre Poilievre's plan is to go back to the type of deal we've had with the United States before the United States blew it up, the deal that the United States specifically says he doesn't want. He wants it to be tariff free. The only tariff free deal that the United States is offering is 51st statehood. He wants to return Canada's auto production to where it was before all of this started over the course of the next 10 years. Yeah, there's motivated by a sense of urgency that's going to get your jobs back really quick before any of this impacts your life for those who have lost their jobs. And he wants to uh, take away the EV incentives and give you a GST rebate on it, which would actually give you less money on the rebate, but would give more people money because it would be GST on all Canadian made vehicles, whether they are green or not. The proposal was announced amid Poilievre's first visit to the United States since U.S. President Donald Trump launched his trade war, a significant marker in the conservative leader's shifting focus on global trade pressures brought about by the Trump administration. Quote, he's going down there to sell Canada. It's what we have to do, conservative labor critic Kyle Seaback told Rosemary Barton Live, said the host a year and 2 months after Prime Minister Trudeau asked them to start doing that. Seaback said the purpose of the trip is not to give the impression that there are two prime ministers in Canada. Rather, he said, with the CUSMA review coming up, Poilievre is making the case to U.S. business leaders about the importance of the trading relationship and how tariffs can hurt both countries. At the heart of this auto strategy is the push to get Trump to drop tariffs on Canada by selling this strategy as a better way to restore U.S. manufacturing. This push rests on the assumption that Trump is open to solving its trade relationship with Canada, despite there being a lack of evidence to suggest willingness on the part of the administration. And I heard somebody say on a political panel show, so Pierre Poilievre is selling hope. I'm going to guess the Prime Minister would respond, like nostalgia, hope is not a plan. Asked how he'd get Trump to give the green light, Poilievre said his plan addresses the president's desire to repatriate production to the U.S. and would see a massive production gain on both sides of the border. Poilievre laid out a one-for-one deal where for every car manufactured in Canada, he said the same producer would get a car to sell duty-free from a partner in CUSMA. This can be sold as a win-win, said Seaback. So every car we manufacture in Canada, we get a car to sell duty-free. Okay. It's a better way for the United States to reshore the auto manufacturing in their country while preserving their best export market for autos, which is Canada. Seaback says this strategy harkens back to the 1965 Auto Pact that kick-started free trade between Canada and the U.S. prior to the North American Free Trade Agreement. Seaback said this new version of the Auto Pact positioned Canada to be able to harmonize with the U.S. on Chinese electric vehicle policy, part of Poilievre's strategy to bring maximum leverage to the CUSMA review. Again, I have to reiterate that a lot of these things that Pierre is mentioning that will give us maximum leverage are things that could only happen many, many years into the future if they would started now, and the CUSMA review is now. You can't get maximum leverage from things that do not exist and cannot exist at the time you go and sit at the table. This is not a serious man. The federal government recently struck a deal with China to bring tariff relief for Canada's agricultural and seafood sectors. Kyle Seaback said, in addition to his comment about to bring maximum leverage, when you put these things together, helping them restore their auto manufacturing, preserving the Canadian market, and better aligned on things like Chinese electric vehicles, we actually think there's an opportunity to get that deal, said Seaback. Yeah. Nope. This is not going to work at all. The U.S. strategy has been focused on protecting its big three automakers, General Motors, Ford Motor Company, and Stellantis. To thwart Trump's protectionist policies, Carney's approach has been to diversify Canada's trading partners and look to attract European, Japanese, and Korean automakers to Canada. Now, more than a year after Trump returned to office, Poilievre is looking to show his plan for dealing with the White House. Quote, for decades, Canada's sales pitch to the world has rested on having tariff-free access to the United States market. CBAC said that if that's not the case, quote, there's not a single producer in the world that will come to Canada to start new production. This is building a little bit on what some of the people in Japan have been saying, that if we can't get our free trade deal with the United States back on track, they see very little to a reason to invest more in Canada, given that it's already the largest one in Canada. I think 70% of all cars made in Canada are Japanese models. Um, so yeah. However, again, if you have a conservative telling you that our pitch to the world relies on having tariff-free access to the United States, and the United States no longer wants that. Right now, we have about 89% tariff-free access, given that the Prime Minister did make the concession of signing an executive order claiming that everything would be tariff-free under CUSMA. When the Conservatives keep on saying that Prime Minister Carney has gotten nothing from the United States. We did get that. Didn't have to talk about it, but we did get that. CBAC calls Carney's approach, quote, managed decline, and he does not believe it will work. Polyev said that even Mexico would have to accept the plan to avoid ending up with something, quote, much worse. Oh, now he's determining Mexican policy too. On Friday, Polyev was in Detroit to meet with senior executives of General Motors and Ford. He crossed the Detroit River back into Canada Sunday to make his auto strategy announcement in Windsor. His U.S. travel will continue with stops in Texas and New York, with no visit planned for the U.S.'s capital. In an interview on the Paul Welsh Show podcast, Polyev said he updated Carney about his travel plans on the margins of In an interview on the Paul Welsh Show podcast, Polyev said he updated Carney about his travel plans on the margins of question period last Wednesday and plans to debrief him once he returns. So yeah, I just, oh my God, this guy. Oh well. But yeah, that's great. His great auto plan. Hope that the U.S. Would want to go back to some old form of the auto pact. Yeah, I don't know. There is some hope that with what's going on in Iran, that we could get an alleviation of certain tariffs from the United States. In that, for example, as we mentioned, first of all, there's the whole oil and gas situation. But of course, there is the whole issue of food as well, given the fertilizers, right? 45% of the sulfur used in fertilizers comes from Iran. Urea is another one that is a high source. Um, so that's one, and the other one, of course, as we mentioned before, was aluminium. And well, the United States needs a lot of aluminium, and if the United States felt that they could take us on because they had sources of aluminium coming from other places, and now Iran is taken offline and there's much more competition for that, then all of a sudden it might be in the United States' interests to no longer be tariffing our aluminium as much, and perhaps our fertilizers and other things like that. So we might, at some point, get to see some tariffs decrease on some of those certain key materials in this particular case as a result of what's been happening over there. But again, would that alone be enough to offset everything else? Probably not, but it could provide a bit of buffer in absorbing what it is that there is to come. Okay, kits and cubs. So that's for the resilience part today. Now we get to move to affordability because there has been some economic data in and a couple of new cost of living measures. The first little bit of economic data I would like to present to you, kids and cubs, is something that I noticed coming in from Bloomberg about the value of our dollar. I think a couple of weeks ago, we presented a whole bunch of well, not a couple of weeks ago, but over the course of the past few weeks, we've been presenting some information. The first one was that, how would you put it? Uh, Pierre was blaming a lot of things on the increase in immigration. And then we had data coming in showing that immigration for last year, well, basically the Canadian population had a net decrease of 0.2%. So when Pierre Poilievre is still out there talking about immigrants, just flooding our country, that's not happening. Uh, on Friday's show, we talked about C4 actively passing, which means that all the talk that Pierre has been saying about, well, the climate Carney will never ever reduce the consumer carbon price. He'll never get away. He's just waiting. He's just waiting. He's going to bring it back. It's gone. Legislatively, it's gone. It's passed. The middle class tax cut, well, not the middle class tax cut, I should say, the tax cut for the two lowest ends of the income tax brackets, that also passed in law. So when he's saying he's raising your taxes, he literally just lowered them. So that's another economic argument of his gone. He's going to keep saying them, but they're no longer real. He is going to talk about investment in Canada drying up, but we just saw data stating that foreign direct investment in Canada has increased. Another one would be about the value of our dollar, and the value of our dollar relative to the United States has been holding up because the United States' current value of currency has been dropping over the course of the latter. I'm just going to take a look here. How much has the US dollar dropped? Dropped over 9% in 2025. It's the largest annual decline in 8 years and continued to weaken in early 2026, hitting 4-year January against a basket of currencies. The decline is driven by fears over Fed independence, huge public spending increases, and policy uncertainty. And the Canadian dollar had been performing well relative to the United States. But when measured against that basket of currencies that mentioned here, it wasn't doing as well. So as of mid-March 2026, the Canadian dollar is trading around 73 cents US, showing relative stability recently, but experiencing volatility early in the year. It has shown a slight year-to-date gain of around 0.17%, but generally remains under pressure from a strong US dollar and domestic economic cooling, including rising unemployment. However, the long-term outlook for the loonie has been good, stating that it could rise closer to 74 to 75 US as the US Fed continues rate cuts. And I've seen some places say 76. Against other currencies, it says that the Canadian dollar has shown some surprising resilience against the British pound and the euro. And looking at wise.com, which is a currency converter, says here the exchange rate for the Canadian dollar to the US dollars is currently 73 cents a day, reflecting a 0.23% change since yesterday. Over the past week, the value of the Canadian dollar has remained relatively stable. And let's see, that's about it there. Okay, so not much new there. But according to Bloomberg, and this is the news that came up, the resiliency, when compared to other denominations across the world, was important enough to be a story, which I'm going to bring to you right here. Oh, and it seems the volume is off. So let's try that one more time.
The Canadian dollar has been gaining momentum, outperforming the U.S. and other G10 currencies with that conflict in the Middle East. Iran, of course, vowing now to escalate attacks in the Gulf. Let's go to Jay Balla, CEO, AIP Asset Management. Jay, thanks for joining us. Why do you think the Canadian dollar is a bit of a go-to right now?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. Right now I think there's, if you look at the world today, I think people are looking for a more stabilizing force. And if you look at Canada, Canada's got strength in oil and gas and resources and a stable financial sector. And so I think, based on that, I think you're going to see a bit more strength on a longer term basis in our stock market. And I think you're going to see more people looking to Canada as more of a safe harbor, right?
Are other currencies also a safer place to go? Are investors looking elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, look, the U.S. dollar is always the go-to in terms of just sheer size and depth, and that's always, I think, the first preference to go to. But I think as, the world is becoming a more sort of destabilized place, and the world is becoming, more with sort of tariff wars, I think probably people are looking to diversify those bets, and, and I think it makes sense to hold some U.S. dollars as well as some Canadian.
There was a deep sell-off at the start of the week. Markets haven't really recovered, or TSX hasn't, and another streak of red today. You say generally that the markets do well in a war. What are you looking at for comparison?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the last time, the most similar case to this would be the Iraq war that we had, for a while. And if you look at that, you had the initial sell-off. But the reality is, what happens in a war, right? Like in a war, governments borrow lots of money, they hire lots of people, they build lots of military equipment, and then they fight a war. And all of that, results in better growth for the economy, right? Especially if you're kind of in the North American side of things. So on that basis, I mean, as much as morally a war may be horrible, economically a war is actually kind of positive, at least from a North American standpoint.
Yeah. A driver of the economy. Okay, we took a look at the price of West Texas a moment ago. It was just hovering under the $80 a barrel mark. We don't know how long the conflict in Iran will go on, but do you think that the price of oil will factor into the Bank of Canada decision?
I do not. I mean, I know it impacts the general consumer, and obviously they have to keep an eye on it. But the reality is oil in and of itself is not part of core inflation. It's part of the broader inflation calculation. And most central banks really just focus on core inflation. How's core inflation coming along? And so, look, I mean, I know oil prices going up kind of hits the pocketbook of the consumer, but in reality, it doesn't really influence policy decisions as much as people think it does.
If this conflict carries on for more than a month or 6 weeks, do you see it as being a pressure on the market? You mentioned markets you normally do well, but there are other ways, of course, the Canadian economy could be affected.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right about that. But the reality is, I think the markets go up either way. It's either it's a short-term war, in which case you get a relief rally, or it becomes a longer-term war. People say, okay, well, we're stuck, right? At the end of the day, it's time for the government to step up and really invest into the military and spend more money. So, longer term, as we saw in the Iraq war, longer term, the stock market tends to do well.
Okay, so what markets do you like right now outside of North America?
Outside of North America, I mean, I would pick other safe harbors. Japan's probably a good place to go. They seem to have found, they seem to have had a landslide election. The new government seems to be very pro-business oriented. And, that's another sort of safe harbor, right? The yen's always been sort of a stable or a more stable sort of currency. Japan's been a relatively stable economy in the world. And I think a lot of people will probably start looking back at Japan.
Okay, outside of the war, you still remain bullish on Canada.
I do. I mean, just if you look at what drives our stock market, the vast majority of it is its energy, its resources, particularly gold, and its financial services, right? Like, I mean, that's the entirety or the vast majority of our index. And I think all of those sectors will do incredibly well over the next few quarters.
All right, Jay Bala, CEO, Senior Portfolio Manager, AIP Asset Management. Jay, thanks for joining us.
All right, there, Hebs. For some reason, whoops. Where am I? There I am. That was not the one I was hoping it would be. For some reason, I think something might have changed in the order. It had some information, of course, about the dollar, but it wasn't exclusively about that. Um, but no, it is the same one. Okay, sorry. I thought it was the wrong one here. It's just that the one I had seen before had a different graphic associated with it, which is why I thought I might have had the wrong story. But yes, indeed, it was indeed the same story that I had. So I did not make the mistake. Okay, that's good to know. Um, so yeah, I wish I could find. I was hoping that there would have been a news article specifically out there that had some data with that how it's performing because it says that it's outperforming the G10 specifically here with regard to how it's been doing. But I was hoping that there would be some actual information here that would give some better perspective on it. And I think I might have found it here, according to the Financial Post, Gigi Suhanik here. It says here that Canada's status as a major energy exporter is currently shielding the Canadian dollar from a surging greenback better than other G10 countries, says currency investors. The loonie was down 0.53% against the US dollar from Friday's close to Tuesday, trading at 72.9%, 72.9 cents. Let me just check a day on that. That was 1 week ago. All right. According to Bloomberg data, other currencies such as the Japanese yen and the Swiss franc were down 1.1% and 2.1% respectively, and the Swedish krona was the worst performer, down 2.6%. The Canadian dollar is holding up better than most of its peers despite the broader US dollar advance, underpinned by the country's status as the net oil exporter, Carl Shamota, chief market strategist at Corpay Currency Research, said in a note on Tuesday morning. So that's the main. So oil. Basically, it is a bit of a petrodollar. While doing better, we of course are doing better. All right. The other data that we have, of course, was with regard to jobs data, and they're the number is that great for the current month, but there is a little bit of an explanation behind that. According to the CBC's Jenna Benchetrit, Canada's economy lost 84,000 jobs in February, while the unemployment rate edged up to 6.7%, Statistics Canada said on Friday, a setback for the labor market, one of the worst monthly job losses seen in years outside the pandemic. The decline in employment was largely driven by a drop in full-time and private sector jobs, the latter offsetting a short period of growth seen earlier in the fall. Employment mostly fell in the goods and services producing industries, with 18,000 jobs lost in wholesale and retail trade, 12,000 lost in construction, and 9,200 lost in manufacturing. Men aged 25 to 54 and young people aged 15 to 24 were the worst impacted by the drop. Several indicators were more or less unchanged from the same time last year, including the unemployment rate, which sat at 6.6% in February 2025, the employment rate, and the number of people working full-time or part-time. So there isn't around the same time last year, again, saying, the number of people working full-time and part-time is about the same. The participation rate, that is the number of people who had a job or were looking for one, fell by 0.1 percentage points to 64.9% in February. Average hourly raises rose 3.9% or 1.42 for a total of $37.56 an hour compared to the same period last year. So hourly wages are rising faster than the inflation still. Catherine Judge, executive director and senior economist at CIBC Capital Markets, said the labor market took a worrisome turn in February, particularly with the loss of full-time private sector roles. The drop in jobs and the uptick in unemployment was in contrast to analysts' expectations that the labor market would gain 10,000 jobs, she wrote, and that the unemployment rate would rise at a slower pace than it did. This is clearly a very worrisome report from the Bank of Canada that shows that labor market slack has increased and activity is frozen amidst trade uncertainty. The central bank has one more major economic data release to look at, Monday's inflation numbers, before it makes its next interest rate decision next Wednesday. As of Friday afternoon, most economists were predicting the bank would hold rates where they are. So there should be inflation numbers out today. The unemployment rate rose or was unchanged in 9 of the 13 provinces and territories last month, according to Statistics Canada. The youth unemployment rate for people aged 15 to 24 ticked up to 14.1%, another blow to a cohort that has struggled with high jobless rate over the last 2 years. The rates for racialized youth were notably higher compared with non-racialized, non-Indigenous youth, the data agency noted. Quote, the fact that the unemployment rate is almost unchanged from a year ago does make me a little bit calmer about this result, said Douglas Porter, chief economist at the Bank of Montreal, in an interview with CBC News. But still, I think the overriding message here is that it was very weak at the start of the year. We've seen almost no job growth whatsoever over the last 12 months, and that's not positive for the economy. The report being exceptionally weak should quash any talk about interest rate hikes, which markets had been pricing in for the second half of the year, said Porter. I actually think the bank should be actively considering the possibility of rate cuts if this kind of weakness in the economy continues in the months ahead. Beyond the fact that consumers are going to be burdened with the hit to disposable income from higher oil prices, we've still got the uncertainty of the USMCA, and on top of that, we've got no job growth. I do not see the Bank of Canada hiking in that environment. There's a couple of things to note about that number, however. And one of the things is that uh, this is frequently reported as number of jobs lost, um, but it also means probably more accurately that it's fewer people working when you count retirements, and particularly when you count work permits expiring. And one of the things that is happening with regard to work permits is that according to immigration, refugee, and citizenship data, there's about 314,538 work permits that are going to expire in the first quarter of 2026 alone, which means over 100,000 pretty much every month. Those show up in the employment numbers as job losses. So if you're looking at the data and you're saying, well, if all those jobs disappeared, how do we have the same amount of people working 1 year later as there was last year? And you can't say, well, it's going because we have more people participating in the labor force because of immigration, because, well, Canada's net population actually decreased last year by 0.2%. So a lot of this could be work permits expiring and not people actually being thrown out of work per se. And if there's 314,000 of them expiring over the first 3 months of this year, well, I mean, if you're spreading that out over 3 months, you're looking at about 104,000 jobs, work permits per month disappearing. So that could have something to do with the sudden high uptick in the numbers. Um, and then, of course, if we do have some new people coming in, when we're talking about the labor participation rate, there are some new people arriving who are maybe not ready to enter the workforce yet because they're still, settling in. So that could also be part of it. Even though the unemployment rate is at 6.7 for this period, there's also some weekly data that comes out, and that's indicating the unemployment rate at 6.5%. And of course, it's also showing that Canada's working population is decreasing. If we are looking again at the labor permits being denied, and again, of course, wages being up still. So it's a shocking headline number. But again, there might be a little bit more behind it than a whole bunch of people, having lost their jobs or ending out on the street. A lot of this could, like I said, be wage permits that are expiring and simply not being renewed, which means those are people that were here temporarily who are now returning to their home countries. Where it can have an impact, however, economically, is that these people are no longer in the country participating in the economy, buying stuff, which can reduce demand. And that could lead to some job losses later on in the numbers from the reduced economic activity. So we'll have to watch for that. I'm not sure how the job permit expiries continue in the later quarters of the month, whether or not a lot of them were front loaded to the beginning of the year, whether or not it's going to continue at this rate for the rest of the year. But yes, that is a little, like I said, important caveat to be aware of when looking at these numbers, that it may not be as terrible as the headline number indicates. There's also some cost of living measures that have been announced that might be able to help you in this time of slightly additional, well, more than slightly, a little bit more economic uncertainty here, kids and cubs. One of the things that is happening is that if you have a checking account, the rules have changed for NSF, or not sufficient fund fees, to be charged to you. This was from March 12th. New regulations come into force today, capping at $10 the NSF fees federally regulated banks charge Canadians. This new measure will help all consumers, especially those who are financially vulnerable. FCAC will oversee industry compliance with the new NSF fee requirements, which includes the following consumer protections. Consumers cannot be charged more than $10 in NSF fees when they do not have enough money in their personal deposit account to cover a payment. Consumers will not be charged an NSF fee more than once in a period of 2 business days for the same personal deposit account. Consumers will not be charged NSF fees on a personal deposit account when the amount of their overdraft on that account is less than $10. And the FCAC, which is, I need to find what that acronym is. The Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, there we go, has some rules with regard to fees and NSF fees available for you. And I will post them here in the chat for those who would like to consult them. There you go. Let's see what else there on that. Minister Champagne announced this. Let's see what it is. By slashing these fees, this new cap is expected to save Canadians more than $600 million annually and provide meaningful relief to those affected by high penalty fees. The minister also took the opportunity to highlight other recent banking affordability measures. There's an enhanced low-cost and no-cost bank accounts are now fully in place as of December 1st, 2025, through a modernized commitment agreed to by 14 federally regulated financial institutions, including Canada's largest banks. All Canadians can now access accounts costing no more than $4 per month with up to 50% more debit transactions. Additionally, $0 per month accounts offering the same features are available to youth, students, seniors receiving the Guaranteed Income Supplement, and registered disability savings plan beneficiaries. And also, modernized check hold rules aimed to increase the amount of immediately available deposited funds from $100 to $250. Contained in Bill C-15, the new rules eliminate timing distinctions between deposit methods, giving Canadians faster access to funds when they deposit a check. The government is also developing regulations to reduce check hold periods so that Canadians don't have to wait as long to access their money. Together, these measures reinforce the government's commitment to lowering bank costs and improving transparency and convenience for Canadians, and complement ongoing efforts to improve affordability for Canadians. Over the coming months, the government will continue to work and engage with experts and stakeholders to inform further actions to support Canadian financial consumers. And the Honorable François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Finance and National Revenue, stated, even if someone is just $5 short when paying a bill or covering a check, they can be hit with a non-sufficient funds fee as high as $50. That's money that could otherwise go towards groceries, medicine, or other everyday essentials. And this isn't uncommon. More than 1 in 3 Canadians are affected by these fees. By capping NSF fees at $10 and strengthening consumer protections, we're helping Canadians keep more of their hard-earned money while making everyday banking fairer and more affordable. And the Honorable Wayne Long, Secretary of State for the Canada Revenue Agency and Financial Institutions, said, high non-sufficient funds fees worsen financial difficulty for Canadians who are struggling to make ends meet. Limiting these fees to just $10 per occurrence ensures fairer treatment for consumers and is part of the bold suite of measures this government is advancing to protect consumers and make banking more affordable for Canadians, including low and no-cost account options and fairer check hold rules. So that's the first thing that is coming on. The second thing here is that the CRTC is to eliminate fees when canceling or switching cell phone and internet plans, according to Sammy Hudis of the Canadian Press. Canada's telecommunications regulator says it will prevent companies from charging customers when they cancel, change, or activate plans. The CRTC says the move is meant to make it easier for consumers to switch internet and cell phone plans with the ability to take advantage of better offers without having to worry about unexpected costs. The new rules will come into effect on June 12th of this year. The regulator says it will announce additional consumer protection measures in the coming months to make it easier to shop for, compare, and choose plans. In late 2024, the CRTC launched a handful of consultations related to empowering cell phone and internet customers, seeking feedback on potential changes around notifications, self-serve options, and fees. The Commission has been considering measures to ensure people know when their plans or discounts are about to end to avoid bill shocks. The CRTC is also exploring potential self-serve options for when customers need to change or cancel their plans, make those actions easier. The proposals came after the federal government made changes to the Telecommunications Act, which required the CRTC to put new consumer protection measures in place. We are taking action to give Canadians more control over their internet and cell phone services, said CRTC chairperson and CEO Vicky E-Trades in a news release. Today's decision removes extra fees to activate, change, or cancel a plan. This means that consumers can switch to a better deal without having to pay extra just to get the service that works best for them. As part of a separate proceeding, the CRTC has been considering whether service providers should be required to display certain information about home internet plans, such as price and speed, through a standardized label. The concept has been compared to food nutrition labels at grocery stores, which list information about serving size and calories in a standardized format. The regulator held a hearing on that proposal last June, where some experts argued the move would help boost consumer literacy when shopping for home internet plans. In 2024, the CRTC's American counterpart, the Federal Communications Commission, began requiring that internet providers display standardized labels, both in store and online, containing information about cost and performance. However, representatives from Canada's telecom industry questioned whether the U.S. regulators' requirements are actually helping consumers, with some companies pointing out they already provide key information that customers need when purchasing a new internet plan. The Commission said Thursday it plans to launch another public consultation to review its consumer protection codes, including the Internet Code and the Wireless Code, with the goal of simplifying and combining them into one code. So there you have it, kits and cubs. Some cost of living affordability measures for you, and a little bit of data on the performance of the economy to help you better plan what it is and to be informed of what's available to you. Okay, we move Cubs from affordability to, and it would appear that Premier Doug Ford, we mentioned very briefly on our show, wants to change the rules with regard to freedom of information laws, and a lot of attention. You have even the Canadian Taxpayers Federation condemning Ford for that. But let's also add the caveat here that in the civil war going on within the Canadian conservative movement, there is Camp Poliev and there is Camp Ford, and they do not like each other very much. And I have the feeling that the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, if we could call it such a thing, is more partisanly on the side of Poliev, and therefore, even though it is right in condemning Ford and his government for the attempt to hide cabinet records from the public, their opposition, especially public one, might have some, motivations behind them. The transparency watchdog, not happy with this whatsoever. Ontario's transparency watchdog says the Ford government planned overhaul of freedom of information laws is, quote, a shocking proposal designed to hide the premier's cell phone records from the public. New policy announced by the government on Friday morning will retroactively block the release of communications from the premier, government ministers, parliamentary assistants, or their staff through access to information requests. It's a policy change the Information and Privacy Commissioner suspects is designed to bail the government of releasing vital documents following a legal defeat. Since late 2022, Global News has been engaged in a battle with the government over Doug Ford's personal call log, trying to access information on a device he uses to run the province. because he's got nothing to hide. Because why would you do government business on your personal phone if you know it can't be accessed with freedom of information requests? And considering the sheer number of scandals befalling this government, um, Greenbelt, Ontario Place, the Ontario Science Centre, the fact that we are paying, I think, is it $400 million to build a parking garage for something, that Therm deal that apparently Doug Ford didn't look into the company that received the contract to see that its performance with regard to other contracts hasn't necessarily been something that inspires confidence. The Skills Development Fund scandal, in which David Piccini, the minister in charge of it, personally chose certain companies that were very low or amongst the lowest in the evaluations to get money, and some of them to get money, more money than those who had had higher objective evaluations by the public service received. Um, yeah, there's a lot going on here. So yes, um, we're also talking about a government that fought so that we could not see the mandate letters, government that refused to participate in tripartite meetings during the convoy, government that has a leader who decided to do business on his personal cell phone, government that fought not to testify at the public inquiry on the Emergencies Act, a government that is fighting to keep Doug Ford's personal phone records a secret, claiming that you can't look at that. That could bring out some information that's embarrassing to the people who holds that phone account. Yes, which is why you probably, if you didn't want to invite that upon yourself, you probably should not have used your cell, right? And now that he's lost, well, now he's just changing the law, and he's changing the law retroactively. Um, from my reading and research, I do not know to what extent. It seems that there is some version of this kind of law that exists already in Alberta and at the federal level as well. I'm not sure if the federal level is as wide-ranging as this one, or if it applies strictly to political staffers. Um, yeah. And then, of course, in that C4 bill that recently passed, it seems that the parties, pretty much, except with the exception of Elizabeth May, all agreed to exempt political parties from certain privacy rules with regard to what it is that they can do with your data. That's probably not okay either. I have not been able to find more information specifically uh, as to what that exception allows them to do that other people are not. I'm still looking for some of that, but yeah, this is not good. Um, Through the process, the government has admitted Ford uses his personal phone for government business, but argued it would be an invasion of his privacy to release it. Twice that argument has been knocked back because uh, when that such a document is given, there can be people in place that go through the numbers and separate the ones that are private from the ones that are government business, and then redact the ones that are private. So he doesn't need to worry about that. Commissioner Patricia Kassim said in a statement it was, quote, alarming the government was rewriting the law after losing in court. Quote, the government of Ontario is currently seeking to leave to appeal a court ruling that unanimously upheld my officer's order to produce call logs from the Premier's personal cell phone that relate to government business, she said. By changing the law retroactively, the government's message is plain. If oversight bodies get in the way, just change the rules. What do Doug Ford and Danielle Smith have in common? I I I I remember Danielle Smith changing the rules for a certain petition and then changing the rules again after the rules were changed for that petition. I also remember Danielle Smith changing the rules on gifts. that they could receive when it was discovered that certain gifts that she did receive may not have been within the rules. I also remember her stating that she doesn't need to respect the court decision that a separation question must be constitutionally valid. I do something, somebody takes me to court, they win. I just, rather than comply with the court's decision, I just change the law. Okay. Under Ontario's current framework, the public is entitled to request documents and communications from civil servants and politicians, with some elements redacted to protect independent decision-making, advice to politicians, and legal advice, among a myriad of other exemptions. Once enacted, the new law will mean that records of the Premier, cabinet ministers, parliamentary assistants, and their offices would no longer be subject to freedom of information laws. Members of the public could still request records held by public servants and government ministries. That would likely exclude Ford's cell phone records from release permanently, including who the Premier spoke to before deciding to remove land from the Greenbelt in 2022. The commissioner said the new changes could destroy transparency. Quote, if records about government business can be shielded from scrutiny simply because they sit in a minister's office, on a staffer's device, or within a political account, public accountability is eviscerated, she wrote. Now, this apparently is the government of Ontario stating that their policy was outdated and it's needing to be modernized because when the bill was written all those years ago, nobody could have predicted all the various devices and ways that we could communicate now. But it's not about the devices, it's about the principle that if you are doing government business, there needs to be a public record of you doing that government business that we can go back and check and people are allowed to ask for because you work for us. It's our information. We paid for it. Got a bit of a news clip here for you from the show Focus Ontario. Journalists Colin DeMello and Ian Callan have been doing some really excellent reporting work with regard to this, and I figured I probably can't say it better than they do, so I should probably just let them say it. So let me find that here for you. There we go. And if you haven't had a chance to see this, hopefully you will enjoy this. Be informed.
Transparency. Coming up, Focus Ontario shielding.
I think I can skip forward the intro. I forgot to set it at the time that the show actually started. Okay, hold on. Let me just bring down the volume there. There we go.
It is a significant overhaul to a key transparency tool used by journalists to inform you about what the government is doing behind the scenes. The Ford government announced on Friday that the freedom of information laws in this province will be changed. Premiers, ministers, and their offices will now all be shielded from the law, which means their communications about government matters will be permanently blocked from public access. This also means existing transparency battles with the Ford government will also be neutralized. I'm going to bring in Global's Isaac Callan now. Isaac leads our FOI requests into the Ontario government. Isaac, so the current FOI system obviously allows us to request documents and communications in ministers' offices to determine just how governments arrive at a decision. What's changing here?
Yeah, Colin, the current system is far from perfect. There's lots of reasons the government can choose not to release information, but the one thing it is broad. Anyone in Ontario who pays $5 can request all sorts of information from the government. They can ask for emails or texts around decisions. They can ask for presentations, slide decks, or data sets the government isn't willing to release. And in the media and other ways, we use this information to try and work out exactly what the government is doing and why. Not to sound like a cynic, but just because the government tells you why it's doing something doesn't necessarily mean that's actually what's motivating it. And getting a look behind the curtain as to what's going on and who was told what when helps us to start to unpick some of the motivations driving a government decision. So take the example of a law that faces a legal challenge. It's something the Ford government has seen repeatedly through its almost 8 years in government. It would be very informative for us to know if the minister had been informed ahead of time that that law might face a legal challenge. That's one of the situations we might be able to use an FOI to understand that the government had known a law might be challenged in court, had chosen to pass it anyway without making changes, and then had the taxpayer on the hook for that decision, paying to fight to protect the law in court. So that's how it works now. What's changing? Well, in short, a lot is changing. The rules that are coming in through this new legislation the government is proposing will protect the decision makers from scrutiny. So civil servants will still be subject to freedom of information laws, but cabinet ministers, parliamentary assistants, and the Premier himself, as well as all the staff who work directly for them, will no longer have to disclose their texts or their emails, particularly around decision making. That means that the people who've actually decided how to spend your money will no longer be having to tell you how they decided to spend it and why. And because of the size of the Ford government, Doug Ford presides over the largest cabinet in Ontario's history, that's going to affect an awful lot of people. That's all of Ford's cabinet ministers, as well as his parliamentary assistants, meaning that some people who ultimately aren't necessarily at the decision-making table, the parliamentary assistants don't sit in cabinet, for example, they're still going to have their communications protected from transparency. The government says, though, despite all of that, that this is just about updating an outdated piece of legislation.
As I mentioned earlier, this law was written 40 years ago. The methods of communication were very different. We had smartphones. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have cyber threats. We didn't have cloud computing. I mean, it was when this legislation was written, it was 10 years before the Spice Girls were a thing. So that's how long ago this legislation was written. It didn't contemplate in the modern world that we're in today.
And just the one last thing to add there, Colin, of course, is the fact that this law is going to be retroactive. So it's not just the FOI requests we file going forward that will be affected, it's those that have already been filed, and perhaps more importantly, those that have been appealed that will be affected by these changes as well.
Right, and of course there is one major FOI that could effectively be stopped in its tracks here. That is the long battle over the Premier's personal cell phone records. Doug Ford recently lost a challenge in court that would have compelled him to release those records. Here's a look at why that is an issue of importance. You could call it the Ford family trademark, handing out a personal cell phone number directly to Ontario residents.
No one in the world, my position, gives out their cell number, and I do, because I want to get the heartbeat and the pulse of the people.
While the Premier routinely fields calls from constituents, he's also spoken to heads of companies, other premiers and prime ministers, and members of the Trump administration. Under provincial law, those calls are considered government business and subject to transparency rules.
It's the people's business to know what their politicians are doing in government with the money that they send them every year.
For more than 3 years now, Global News has been locked in a transparency battle with the Premier's office over Doug Ford's cell phone records. And now an Ontario court has ordered the Premier to release his phone logs, arguing they are government records and shielding them from the public undermines democracy.
Yeah, we're gonna appeal.
The Premier is pushing back, defying the order outright, even the calls related to government business.
No one influences Doug Ford, I can assure you that. What is right for the people, that's my decision. That's what I'm going to focus on. And I would say that 90 some odd percent, I don't know exactly, are all personal. People have issues.
Critics say they aren't buying the Premier's excuse.
There are a lot of people who influence not just this Premier, but premiers who came before him. And I think it's important that when a Premier is making a big decision, and that people are lobbying him, we have a lobbyist law, they're calling him, they're saying, we don't want you to do this, or we want you to do this, that we should know who's calling.
All right, Isaac, so because this law is retroactive, that FOI and the battle could be quashed. But let's take a look at the bigger picture here. It's not just journalists. Voters and taxpayers are also impacted by this.
Yeah, Colin, this legislation operates essentially under the idea that they work for you. Cabinet ministers, politicians and their staff are all paid with taxpayer dollars, and the decisions they make are around taxpayer dollars as well. When they take on debt, it's not the cabinet minister or the government who takes on the debt, but it is the taxpayers and the province. And Ontario NDP leader Marit Stiles says that just because the way people have communicated changed doesn't mean the right to access that information and that transparency should be any different now.
I don't know about that. You know, for example, I think that, first of all, I think actually it's more important now than it ever has been for exactly that reason. There are more and more ways that government can avoid certain channels, and a good example is the Premier trying to use his personal device for government business because he thought he could avoid freedom of information. He thought he could avoid having to share those details. When you are elected as the government of this province and the Premier of this province, you have a responsibility to behave in a certain way. I actually think this is why these laws are more important than ever. I think it's extremely important we have now access to the texts and the messages that way because, you know, obviously we don't all write letters to each other anymore on notepads.
We should say this law hasn't yet been introduced, but it does look, Colin, like it's going to get a little harder to find things out here in Ontario.
All right, an important story. Global's Isaac Callan at Queen's Park. Thank you. After the break, a conversation about conservation.
All right, so there you have it, kits and cubs. The good folks from Focus Ontario having prepared a pretty much comprehensive report on what was going on and what the consequences would be to us. Hopefully, we'll be able to find more information over the next while as the story follows about what that access is like in other jurisdictions, and whether or not Doug Ford is going to go through with tabling this as legislation. But yeah, it's definitely not a good idea here. Kit Bucky reminds us here that the Liberal government got excoriated for wiping hard drives, but now Ford is quashing all transparency and accountability, and his supporters swallow it. Absolutely. And there has been, if I remember correctly, some commentary from former Premier Kathleen Wynne when it comes to this in particular. I don't know if it's readily accessible here. But yeah, she definitely did not think that this was a particularly good idea. So yeah, Kathleen Wynne, who's experienced this personally, what information freedom of information requests can do. She said specifically here, being scrutinized is an integral part of the job of public service. Doug Ford is changing a law to shield politicians from scrutiny. So there you go. And according to Siobhan Morris of CTV, a blistering take from Ontario's Information and Privacy Commissioner, this quote is about hiding government-related business to evade public accountability. By changing the law, is plain. If oversight bodies get in the way, just change the rules. Wow. Okay. Definitely something that is going to keep in the headlines. And of course, Doug Ford claiming that his is the most transparent, one of the most transparent governments. Thank you, Donald Ford. I mean, Douglas Trump. I mean, really? Doug Ford's government is one of the most transparent ever. Yeah, Doug Ford maybe needs to wake up and smell himself. There's no reality in which that is actually true. Yeah, no reality in which that's true. Fords and transparent terms that go together, and when you it's a very interesting thing that he's done, right? I give my personal cell phone number to people, which then creates the basis for you to then say, well, I can't give you my cell phone number to check the people's business I've been doing on the phone because, some of these phones are personal and I've taken a lot of constituents calls and, well, uh, I can't have that information coming out. Who calls? They called me in confidence. Mm, mm. Perfect way to cover that kind of activity. Wonder if that activity is recent or whether it happened when he was at City Hall as well. And then, of course, that guy saying, well, these rules haven't been updated since the Spice Girls. Ooh, yes, yes, because again, as Style pointed out, it's the fact that we have new ways to communicate means that we need to make it such that if you use all those other new ways to avoid public scrutiny, that they can't be scrutinized. That's how you modernize the law in the best public's interest. Right. Okay. We now move on to lunacy. It would appear that Pierre Poilievre has decided that he has not alienated enough people yet. He's lost a member of his caucus from Alberta, he's lost one from Nova Scotia, and he's lost one from Ontario. And now it seems like he's working on Quebec because for some reason, it would appear that the Conservative Party of Canada has decided that they want to breathe new life into Don Cherry, of all people. According to Michael Saba of the Canadian Press, opposition is mounting among federal Conservatives in Quebec against their own party's push to award the Order of Canada to controversial hockey commentator Don Cherry. In a social media post late Thursday, the party's Quebec lieutenant said he believes appointing Cherry would be, quote, a bad idea given his unacceptable remarks towards the Quebec nation and Francophones, and pretty much anybody else who wasn't a white Anglophone man. The Order of Canada is awarded in recognition of exceptional achievements, extraordinary contributions to the nation, or remarkable dedication to a community. Conservative MP Andrew Lawton is behind the nomination, has been pushing for signatures on an online petition hosted on the party's website. Yes, let's honor Don Cherry and let's bring back everything John A. Macdonald. To show that we're a big tent party where everyone is welcome. Yay. For decades, Don Cherry has celebrated hockey, honored veterans, and said what millions think without apology, Lawton said in a social media post last week. Yeah, that was the problem. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who was among a number of Conservatives to support the petition, said on social media that Cherry embodies what it means to be a proud Canadian. The 92-year-old was a mainstay in the popular Coach's Corner segment of Hockey Night in Canada broadcasts for nearly 4 decades, where he was known for his outlandish shoots. His commentary outside of hockey was at times controversial. Cherry often mangled the names of foreign-born and francophone players on his broadcasts. In 2004, he was publicly reprimanded by the CBC and subjected to a 7-second tape delay when he said only Europeans and French guys wore visors. In 2013, he faced backlash for saying female reporters should not be allowed in NHL dressing rooms. He was fired in November 2019 for calling immigrants, quote, you people, and suggesting not enough new Canadians honor the country's fallen soldiers by wearing poppies. In a social media post announcing his departure from Hockey Night in Canada, CBC said his remarks were, quote, divisive, discriminatory, and offensive. Cherry stood by his remarks at the time, telling the Canadian Press he was not singling out visible minorities. Yes, he was singling out all the white immigrants that don't wear the poppy. The Conservative petition said Cherry's candid, unapologetic style reflects a spirit of authenticity and independence that resonated with millions of Canadians. On Friday, Ontario MP Jamil Jawani posted on social media that he had signed the petition, as did Alberta MP Billy Morin. Poilievre did not address the controversy Friday during a press briefing in Windsor, Ontario. At the time of publication, his office had not responded to questions about whether he still supports the candidacy and whether the petition will remain online. Poilievre sought to defend the party's Order of Canada push early on Friday while attempting to find the positive in Cherry's nomination. He cited his unwavering support for veterans and the fact that he had mentioned on air the death of a young Quebec hockey player. Other Quebec Conservatives have expressed their disagreement with the proposed nomination. Luc Berthaud, MP from Mégantic-l'Érable-Pinière, said if Cherry was to be awarded the Order of Canada, it would, quote, irreparably discredit all previous recipients. Many Quebecers who have accomplished extraordinary things, particularly in the regions, deserve this honor far more than this commentator, he said in a social media post in French. And their successes are not the result of controversial remarks. Popularity is not a criterion when it comes to honoring Canadians for their achievements. Fellow Conservative Gérald Deltel, MP for Louis Saint-Laurent, Aquia-Wenherac, said Friday that Cherry has made unacceptable and contemptuous remarks towards Francophones, among others. Caucus colleague Éric Lefebvre, MP for Richmond Arthabaska, insisted the country's highest civilian honor should be awarded to people who embody the values of inclusion, respect, and unity that define Canada, and that awarding it to Cherry would send the opposite message. Canada is a country founded on diversity, mutual respect, and the recognition of its two official languages, he said. Mr. Cherry's repeated remarks have often given the impression that some Canadians are less legitimate than others. On Thursday, as the controversy began to gain momentum, the Conservative spokesperson on official languages, Joël Godin, hinted he was among the opponents. These are initiatives by members of Parliament, he remarked, adding he has serious doubts. And on that, these initiatives should not be coming from members of government. The Order of Canada is supposed to be a nonpartisan thing. You send your nominations into the Order of Canada, and when you do, you are asked not to speak publicly about who it is that you have nominated in case the person you have nominated does not get accepted, so as to not cause them any embarrassment. This is not something that MPs do. Start campaigns to get somebody the Order of Canada. Richard Martel, a Conservative MP and former hockey coach, said the Order of Canada committee must base its decision on, quote, Cherry's achievements in the field of sports. Whether you like Don Cherry or not, back in the day, all hockey fans would rush to their TVs on Saturday nights to watch Coach's Corner, he recalled. On Thursday, his colleague Gabriel Hardy, MP from Montmorency-Charlevoix, praised the great things Cherry has done. Quote, we like Don, he said before describing his past comments about Francophones as, quote, mistakes. A Quebec spokesperson for the NDP said the party, quote, condemns Cherry's nomination and is calling on the Conservatives to withdraw their proposal. Quote, the Order of Canada was created to recognize the country's finest citizens. Don Cherry's comments about Francophones, women, immigrants, and many others disqualify him from consideration, wrote Charles Orme in an email in French. Cherry has been awarded several honorary medals and has been inducted into the Canadian Walk of Fame. Ontario Premier Doug Ford recently visited him after it was announced he will receive the Order of Ontario, which is probably what maybe prompted all of this. But yes, it was talked about yesterday on the show Tout le monde en parle, the big Saturday evening rendezvous event in the province of Quebec, talk show where various guests from politics, community, the world of entertainment, culture, everywhere just come for discussion with two moderators. And they have several guests throughout the evening. Some of them stay and participate in other people's conversations a little bit or offer a comment here and there. It is a very popular show with over typically about 1 million viewers every week. And if it makes it on Tout le monde en parle, it has the public's attention. Let's just put it that way. Chantal Hébert compares this to the Prime Minister's post-Davos speech in which that he made in Canada, during which he talked about the Plains of Abraham and talked a little bit more about Canadian history as he sees it, and that raised some objections from Francophones in Quebec, but it didn't really resonate in English Canada. And she noted that the big difference here is that when it comes to Don Cherry getting the Order of Canada, there's as much objection to it in Anglophone Canada as there is in Francophone Canada. So this is not a good move from Pierre Poilievre and from the Conservatives, which leads me to believe once again that given that Pierre Poilievre has had to come out and say some things for him seem to be harsher against Donald Trump, but they're not particularly harsh at all. Turning around and saying Canada will never become the 51st state, and so pretty much, there's no reason to worry about that. Yeah, there is a reason to worry about that, because it's not out of the question that we could become the 51st state. It could be imposed upon us by force, and that's why we are so mad. Pierre doesn't seem to get that. He seems to think that the offer will always be, well, hey, do you want to? And if we say no, that answer will be accepted with grace and no retaliation whatsoever, and no effort on the other party to ignore that response and try to make it happen anyway. So he may have been getting a little bit of talk from the base to whom he is beholden, and which he fears, because they hold his job and future in their hands, and therefore maybe thought that he needed to throw them a little red meat to compensate, and was really hoping that, hey, let's nominate Don Cherry for the Order of Canada might pass under the radar as being the dog whistle that it is. It'll be harmless. It'll go unnoticed. Well, clearly you miscalculated, and you scored an own goal, because they're talking about it on Tout le monde en parle. That's not a good sign for you, especially with the by-election coming in Terrebonne. Not that you had any chance there, but they might just kissed it goodbye there. Last time you got 18% in Terrebonne. It would be interesting to see, after you've come out in support for Don Cherry receiving the Order of Canada, what that number becomes in this by-election. I have a feeling it might be substantially lower. So yeah, hey, listen, if you've got a few more MPs to spare, this is the move. And at a time like this, in the current geopolitical context, with what's going on in Iran and whatnot, really your freaking priority is Don Cherry? Danielle Smith got in on it, by the way, as well. Of course, Doug Ford is probably already in on it, given that Don Cherry's receiving the Order of Ontario. But like, come on, man. Really? This is your priority. This is the thing that you guys thought was the media getter here. Lunacy. Pierre can't read a room, man. Just can't read a room. Well, kids and cubs, that's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us, because we love making this for you. Remember, sharing is caring, and word of mouth is priceless, so please tell your peeps and poops all about us. We really appreciate it and love it when you do, especially when you include a little word saying what it is our content has resonated with you, because that means the world to us. It's advertising that we just cannot buy, and given that you are influencers in your circle, it goes a long way. So thank you for your help in that. And if you would like to help us in other ways, kids and cubs, one of the ways you can do that is by scanning this QR code, which will bring you to our YouTube page if you are not there already. And if you are there already but have not yet clicked on our subscribe button, could you, because that helps us very much with the algorithm, and we thank you so much for that. And while you're there, click on our like and share buttons as well. That also helps get the word out, and Kits, Cassie, and Elaine would definitely approve. Now, another way that you can help us, kids and cubs, is if you want to encourage us to do more of this and help us to be able to do more of this by offering us a little gift of funding, let's say, because we do incur some costs to bring this show to you. We would appreciate your enthusiastic expression of encouragement in the form of a donation, because here at the Beaver Lodge, we shake it for tips. Oh, a little bit of shoulder. Boom, 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 boom. There you go. Hair flip. There you go. Head flip. Hair flip too. There you go. We shake it for tips. And if you would like to give us a tip, and I see you kids, again, yes, the tip is the best part. I get it. I get it. We would be very grateful to receive one. There are several ways that you can donate to the show. You can make a contribution through our YouTube by buying a membership or by making a super chat donation. And there we get 70% of your donation. You can go to our coffee page, which this QR code will bring you to coffee, ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, all in one word. And there we get 95 to 97% of your donation. And we have one-time donations and a monthly recurring donation that you can stop at any time if you would like to offer us ongoing support. And we thank you for that. And we also have our email address, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com, to which you could send a direct transfer if you're doing the Buy Canadian thing or just want to make a donation that doesn't go through any USCE Tech Bros. You go through there, and because it's Canadian bank to Canadian bank, there are zero service charges. We receive 100% of your donation, so your Beaver buck goes all that much further. Extra bang for your buck. That's always a good thing. So we thank you for your support. It means the world to us, and we hope that we have as good a year this year as we had last year. You helped us to be able to grow a little bit last year and modernize ourselves, and definitely it came in handy this year when we had to go independent. Again, thank you for all your help and support. If you like our content, we really appreciate it when you let us know by sending us a cup of coffee or a mug of hot chocolate. Because a moist beaver is a happy beaver. So make your beaver happy. Maybe that came out wrong. Oh well. Kids and cubs. Let's see. Oh, yes. truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com. Our email address is where you can write us if you can't contribute anything in terms of funds, but you still want to contribute to the show by letting us know what you think of it, good, bad, or ugly. We take compliments and constructive criticism, or if you have some guest suggestions for us for our interview project series, we definitely love to hear about that. Remember, we have the Kids Who Cook hashtag if you're making something yummy, and some of the kids suggested Kids Who Craft. Of course, if you happen to make things, if you knit, if you crochet, if you're a painter, if you're a taxidermist, whatever it is that you do that tickles your fancy, if it's creative and involves a skill, take some pictures, let us see it, let us know it. We are more than happy to share your work, especially if you also happen to be running it as a small business. Give you a little plug. Why not? So let's help each other out. And of course, if you happen to have some good news, some things that you're celebrating, you got a job, you're going to the cabana suc with your sweetie. Hello, Kid Pucky. I hope it went well. Anything like that, please let us know, because there's so much going on in the world today that your happy news makes the research portion of the show much easier. Every now and then we can take a little break from the doom and just read a bit of good news that happened to you. And that gives us the energy to go back to reading and listening to the things that so that you don't have to. There you go. Oh yes, kids who garden as well. Kids who cultivate. if we're staying with the C words here. Taxidermist, show me your stuffed beaver. Oh, people. Naughty, naughty, naughty. And I approve. All right. Because democracy is something that you do, kids and cubs. Of course, if you are an NDP member, the voting is on right now for the NDP leadership. The results will be delivered on the 29th. And please make sure that if you're voting by mail, that your vote is put in the mail early enough to get there on time. And of course, if you plan to go to the convention in Winnipeg, you can vote on site. Kids and cubs as well, the by-elections, 3 of them coming up, April 13th. It could be less than 30 days until a Carney majority government is actually elected, even though the Conservatives or Democrats or other parties will make you believe that it was all achieved through backroom deals. No, we actually have a chance to certify that with an election. 3 by-elections coming up: Scarborough Southwest, University Rosedale, and Terrebonne in the province of Quebec, the first 2 in the province of Ontario. Please, kids and cubs, make your plan to vote. Call Elections Canada to volunteer at a polling station if you haven't had that experience already. It's very rewarding. Of course, you can call your candidate of choice to volunteer, and make some phone calls, knock on some doors, all that kind of stuff. Your help would definitely be needed, but please be engaged in the democratic process. But most importantly, plan your vote. Tell people around you, especially if they're in the riding, of course, that you plan to vote. Encourage them to vote. Maybe even organize a vote outing where you all go together and maybe go out and have a coffee or a bite afterwards to celebrate having done democracy, because every effort deserves a little reward. So why not treat yourselves? So yes, very important. We have the public consultation on the high-speed train. Go to altotrain.ca and look at that. That continues until the 29th. We have House of Commons petition number E7148, sponsored by Bruce Fanjoy, in order to make it such that the House of Commons require all federal party leaders to obtain and maintain top secret security clearance to ensure they are fully informed of threats to Canada's national security and able to act decisively to protect Canadians and our democracy. And that way, if you had that, maybe certain leaders, such as Pierre Poilievre, wouldn't be making claims that there are of how many IRGC members there are in Canada, something he possibly could not know unless he had that security clearance. So that would prevent him from making stuff up. Or maybe it would prevent him from all those meetings that he has at his campaign events with people who perhaps with whom he perhaps should not, because we've seen a lot of those photos, and it seems that recently there is another piece of news that has happened where there were 2 people who have been recently, I think, arrested for the death of an Iranian Canadian who had publicly expressed displeasure with the current Iranian regime, or the one at least of Ayatollah Khamenei. And he is not alive anymore. And turns out that at a campaign event of some kind, at some point, Pierre had a picture taken with them as well. So yeah, he's probably going to be asked about at some point. He's probably going to give us one of those typical answers again. I meet a lot of people. I shake a lot of hands. That type of stuff. But if I had a security clearance, maybe people would know that these are the type of people that show up at his events, and he might do something about that. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, that petition has crossed the 40,000 point, 40,269 over the course of the weekend. So please keep circulating it and drawing attention to it. It goes on till April 7th, 2026. And I think that is all. The democracy is something that you do things. The only law I have is if you would like to make a contribution to the Fill the Stands program campaign here from the Canadian Paralympic Committee, because the Paralympics are now over and you have been thoroughly entertained and inspired by Canadian athletes who did so well. Big shout out to the Canadian curling team, the Cardiac Canadians, who very much lived up to their name with how they won that gold medal. The most exciting end to a curling match, any type of curling match that I've ever seen in my life. And of course, they won the gold there. And that was one of the 15 medals that Canada brought back from the Paralympics: 3 gold, 4 silver, and 8 bronze. I'm doing the Canadians who did make us proud thing a little earlier today than normal. And 3 gold, 2 of them which went to Natalie Wilkie, who was a 4-time medalist at the Paralympics and the first person chosen to carry the flag in and out of the Olympics for the opening and closing ceremonies. And her co-flag bearer for the closing was Mark Idison, the skip of Team Canada's wheelchair curling team that the entire nation has fallen in love with. And may I say that if somebody wanted to capitalize on this, this would be a very, very good time for somebody to announce that there's an annual wheelchair curling championships at the level of the Briars or the Scotties that gets that type of attention and will be shown on national TV and give our para wheelchair curling athletes from coast to coast to coast an opportunity to compete at high levels here in Canada. I know that there's been some events at the Grand Slam of Curling events, some wheelchair events there, but it would be really nice since it has captured a moment and people seem to enjoy it to let's give it the full treatment. Why not? Because people really loved it, and it would be a shame for this moment to not be capitalized on. So, Curling Canada, Mr. Vancouverden, P. Vancouverden, Prime Minister, if you're thinking about boosting funding for sport, this is something that I'm sure Canadians would be very supportive of. All right. But yes, the Paralympics being done. And if you want to participate in the Fill the Stands, 14,148 seats have been purchased, $353,715 have been raised to date. A lot of contributions in the final weekend. I'm just going to put this up here on screen for you, kids and cubs, so you can see how close to the goal we are of filling the stands. So again, just because the game's over doesn't mean it's too late to contribute. If you are able to make a last minute donation in order to express your support for the wonderful job that has been done, then please go to the page and make a donation. It is an investment that will certainly be worth it and that will pay back over years to come, because our athletes are some of our best ambassadors, and therefore I have included it in the chat. All right, kids and cubs, it could be a tough world out there, so please be kind to and gentle with yourself, and we will see you tomorrow. Now, at the count of 3, may I please have you say, Mr. Beaver, please cue the cock on 1, 2, and 3. Let me hear it. Oh, yes. There we go. And I heard some tinges of "Oh Canada" in the back there as people are celebrating our success. And let's not forget the well-earned silver medal from our Canadian para hockey ice team. And let's hope that the next Winter Olympics have women's para hockey as well, because it's time. It was time long ago, but it's definitely time now. All right, since you said it so. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors: the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters; CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community; and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music. There we go. That was a longer pause. Kids and Cubs, no Canadians who make us proud additionally to bring to you because I kind of did it early. So I'm just going to say amour et bisous, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye, everyone.